All right. Hi, we are here with Fuacata, and this is our Latinx Improv Festival here at Just the Funny, and we've got a great night of shows ahead of us. We've got so much going on. It all begins with our big panel discussion, and we're going to be talking to some of the best and the brightest from all over the Latinx improv community, and we're bringing them in all the way from everywhere from LA to Texas to Chicago to Miami to other parts of Florida like Sarasota and beyond. We're going to be getting a lot of great voices in to talk about everything Latinx and improv. Plus later on tonight at 9 o'clock, we've got shows starting all throughout the night going well past 10 o'clock and finishing off with our improv jam here at Fuacata. Now, normally we've done this at the Just the Funny Theater in person, and that's what we did last year when we started the festival. But this year we're here online, so we're going to have some fun online with you. Hopefully you're having a good time. Make sure you grab a drink, that you're having a great time sitting, enjoying yourself while you're going to hopefully learn a little bit during this panel and get a little bit more insight. And then later on, have some fun with our Latinx improvisers. And the cool part about this festival is that it's going to have two very different voices, meaning that all of our participants on our panel are not going to be performing, and all of our participants who are performing will obviously not be on our panel. So you're going to get to see lots of different Latinx improvisers throughout the night. And at the very end of the night, you might see some of our panelists come in and perform with the performers in our jam, and that'll be later on tonight at the end of the night. Once again, this is being put on and hosted by Just the Funny here in Miami. So big thank you to Just the Funny. My name is David Christopher, by the way, and I'm going to be your host for tonight, and we'll be taking us all the way through. If you like what you see and you want to support live theater, improv comedy, or you want to just be generous of any way you can, go to our page at justthefunny.com/support. You can go there and find out more about how you can help theaters or help our theater, Just the Funny, along, because right now theaters are really taking a hit, and Just the Funny is no exception. It's a great way to help help a theater out. And not only that, you can support a lot of things, whether it's sponsor a show or potentially a podcast down the line, or even if you want, you can forward the dreams of improv to a student and make sure that that student gets an improv education in these tough times. And you can do that at the support page. So you can actually support a student. But let's get to our panel. Let's see who we have here. So we're going to bring out our panelists. I'm going to introduce them one by one. First up, we have all the way from Chicago, Illinois, by way of Miami. Her name is Steph Perez. Let's say hello to Steph. Hey, Steph, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm cold.
Brr. Well, yeah, we're here in Miami for this festival, so sorry, but we wish the cold on ourselves. It's been really hot down here and rainy, but yeah. Thank you for being here tonight. We're going to bring along our next wonderful panelist, and our next panelist is all the way from Sarasota, Florida. We have the venerable Will Luera. So there he is, Will.
Hello.
Hey, Will.
Yes. Hi, David. Very happy to be here. Hello, Steph.
Thanks. Thank you for being here, Will. I know that you've got a busy schedule, so you're everywhere lately, and that's fantastic. So thank you for being here with us tonight.
Thank you.
Moving it along, I'm going to bring in, let's get Julia Morales in. Julia's coming in all the way from Chicago as well. Hi, Julia.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. Very happy to be here. And
awesome.
Yes, it's cold.
Now, what is cold for you right now in early October, Chicago? Just so we can get some point of reference.
I'm being a bit of a baby, but anything lower than 30 or 20 is pretty cold to me.
So is it lower than 30 or 20 right now?
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's 57 degrees in my bedroom.
I'm just saying, I think a number of us might wish for that, but okay. All right. No complaints. We'll keep it moving. All the way in, then let's take it down south again. Let's go to Austin. Let's get Laura Galan-Wells in here. Laura, how are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. And since we're all talking about weather, it's still warm here, and I was swimming in a creek yesterday.
Oh, I like it. Rubbing it in, too.
Right.
It's good. It's all good. Great to see you. By the way, Laura and her team of Scandola were here last year for Fuacata, and we loved having you here, and it's so great to have you back. Let's keep it moving. We're going to bring it all the way from Los Angeles. We'll take it out west. Let's get Eddie Mujica, who's also a big Miami guy as well. Hi, Eddie.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. It's about 80-something degrees, but it's not humid out here, so doing well.
I like how everybody's doing a weather report now. We went there. And thanks for repping Miami with the hat as well, especially the tropical Miami Heat version there. We'll keep this rolling. Moving along next, we've got Nicole Perez, and Nicole's also coming from Chicago. So Nicole, come and say hello.
Oops, so sorry. Hey, how's it going? Nice to see everybody. Thank you.
Hey.
Yeah, just like Julia and Steph, it's pretty. I lit a pumpkin candle today because of how chilly it was. So I was like, all right, now we could take out our turtlenecks, take out our pumpkin candles, get this party going.
That's right. And by the way, Nicole, you were here last year with Latinx.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic to have you back again. So
Yeah,
thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, super excited about this panel. But we definitely have one more person left, and that's going to be Marlene Marcos. And Marlene's coming all the way from Miami, where I'm at, but she's in a different part of Miami. Hey, Marlene.
Of course I'm from Miami. I have my cafecito ready. It's about 83 degrees cafecito, so I'll definitely have that.
Leave it to her to come with props. Nice.
Absolutely.
Well played. Well played.
Gotta have
Cheers.
those.
There's water coming right back at you.
I'll save
all
this
right.
for you guys.
So we've got a lot to tackle here. Came up with a number of questions. By the way, our panel has no idea what I'm about to ask them, and it's by design. But nothing's dangerous or totally off topic or too out there. But I did want to, before we get started, let's go ahead and let's go around the virtual room here, and let's find out more than just names. Let's find out a little bit more about you. So I'm going to ask you, if you can, please go ahead and tell us obviously who you are, but where you perform, so what theater you perform with, and a little bit about your improv experience. And let's try to keep that to 30 seconds because I really want to get into these questions, and I think you got a lot more to say than just who you are and where you're coming from. So we'll start off with Steph.
So originally from Miami, moved to Chicago because Eddie inspired me to. So I was performing at IO Theater before it closed down. I've been on 2 Herald teams. I've written my own one-woman show and performed it at JTF as well as IO. I've produced a few Latinx shows at IO, and I'm currently a Bob Curry 2020 fellow. So as soon as Second City opens up again, I'll be writing a showcase with my fellow Bob Curry fellows, and hopefully getting all that Latina Cuban stuff in there. And that's it.
I feel pow, 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 pow. All right. All right, Will, this could take a while, so give us a little bit about you, please.
I'll be really quick. So I'm originally from Chicago, but then moved to Boston, where I was there for just over 20 years, but now I've lived in Sarasota for the last 6 years. Work at Florida Studio Theater as the director of improv, but I'm also involved with a couple of theaters in Boston at the same time, and I do a lot of touring. Very excited to be here. Thank you.
This is fantastic. Thank you, Will. I love the just 20 years part. That's great. That's an improv career in and of itself. We'll keep it rolling. Julia, please tell us all about you and what you're up to.
Yeah, hi. Julia Morales, also known as Jules, and I'm originally from Houston, Texas. I've been doing improv, comedy, and acting, stuff like that for about over 12, 13 years now. I don't keep up anymore. Started off in New York and moved to Chicago in 2015 because I've been touring with the Second City. I'm on a currently kind of stalled right now, obviously, with the Green Coat touring company, but I write, direct, actually trying to open a theater. No, I'm not trying. I am opening a theater out here in Chicago. I'm very excited. And yeah, just, I do a lot of stuff.
Jules, what's the name of that theater?
Stepping Stone Theater.
You got to get some plugs in there.
Oh,
Nice.
yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Got to support. All right. Thank you. Laura, Laura, tell us all about what's going on.
Well, I am a Texas native. I grew up mostly overseas, eventually came back to Texas. And here at Austin, my home theater is Hideout Theater, where we do a lot of narrative improv. That's their specialty. And how I got to know David was that Hideout Theater had an all Latinx show called Escándalo, and I was cast in it. And then after our run was over, we turned it into a troupe with the director's blessings, and eventually got a residency at our local Mexican American Cultural Center. I say local, like every city has one, but ours does. So we get free rehearsal and performance space through them, and advertising and marketing, and it's really such a blessing. I also have a couple other troupes, and just generally do all kinds of fun stuff. Oh, one other thing I do that's along the theme of Latinx is I'm one of the directors for Spanish Maestro, and that is all Spanish, improv games and such.
Awesome. Thank you. Eddie.
Hey, I'm originally from Hialeah, Florida. I actually got my start at Just the Funny many years ago. I then moved to Chicago when I won a diversity scholarship. I was there for about 5 years. I toured for 2 years with the Second City, Redco, and then I performed on the ETC stage for 2 reviews, and then I moved to LA. And actually in Chicago, I started a Latinx improv group called Geraldo, and then I brought it out to LA because some of us were out there, and we were performing regularly until, we know what's up. Yeah.
That's right. Okay. Thanks for that, Eddie. Nicole, let's hear about what you're up to in Chicago.
Hey, so I was born and raised in Chicago. I'm a North Sider, and I'm just kind of a Chicago townie. I just never left. So, I've been doing improv for the last 5 years. I've been doing short form and long form. So we've done shows at Second City theaters, not the Second City ETC. So I like to tell people that when I'm doing improv, like, oh, wow, you did it at Second City. We did it at the smaller theaters. Anyways, IO Theater, and then we do Las Tinas, which is also like a Escándalo. We do improvised telenovelas. And then I've been a working voice actor for about 7 years. So that's kind of what I do a lot for during the day. And I used to substitute teach. So that was kind of, but in terms of anything else, and I did musical improv for 3 months, and then I decided never to do it again. It's fun. This was a good experience. Just in this time in history.
That sounds like the rest of the time that we have for the panel right there, just to ask that question. So with that, I'll move on to Marlene just so we can get to the other questions, because that's good. Marlene, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. I've been involved as a theater person all my life. I've studied theater, and I'm originally from Hialeah, Florida, so whoop, whoop, 8 blocks away from Eddie. I grew up in Miami my whole life. Spanish was my first language, and I performed Spanish theater during my young adult life, and been a professional theater performer, actress, and for over 20 years. And one of the things that has brought me joy is teaching improv and performing improv and directing with Just a Funny for the past 10 years, actually 12 years. So I'm very excited.
Cool. This is great. And it kind of is a great springboard into the very first question. And I'll leave this open so we can go in any order you like. But my first question is, how did you get started in improv? Because everybody's got a very distinct thing. And I know that some of you may have touched on that, but for those that didn't, or you want to dive a little bit deeper, and I specifically mean, how did you get started in improv, and how was that experience as somebody who is a Latinx improviser?
Well, I think I was heavily privileged to be in Miami, and to be from Miami, just because the community is so welcoming. So when I moved to Chicago, it was a big shock when I was introduced to the rest of the United States outside of North Cuba. I would say that my experience was very privileged. It was 2013 and I had recently graduated from FIU with my theater degree. And, you know, I was really into acting and pursuing that. And I hadn't been on stage in a year because I was just like, you know, getting my feet on the, you know, ground of adulthood and, you know, trying to pay bills and do all the regular adult stuff. And I was like, I need to get back on stage. And like, I don't have a time for a play right now or any of this stuff. So I was like, I'm going to sign up for improv classes. What, you know, nothing bad could happen, right? And then of course I got sucked in. So here we are. But yeah, I went through classes at Just the Funny, which was super, you know, I find it, after moving to Chicago and realizing how hard it is for the Latino community to just be involved or even mentioned in improv in general, I realized what a privileged experience it was to be part of a, you know, predominantly Latino community and also cast. So in that respect, I think that I was given, you know, all the right tools and guidance to be the best that I could be. And that prepared me for, you know, the rest of the world outside of North Cuba. But even then, nothing can brace you for white America, I'm Mexican. So, you know, that was my experience.
Yeah. Who else has a story?
I mean, I can only say like my story is, you know, I fell into improv because I went to the American Musical and Dramatic Academy, which is an acting school. I started in New York and finished in LA, and everything was super stereotyped. I mean, typecast and very racist. And I just felt like I was stuck in a bubble. And one of the classes that we were required to take was improv. And I didn't know what that was at all, but I was really good at it. And one of my teachers kind of pulled me to the side and was like, you know, Frances Collier, actually, she's a Second City alum, and she was my teacher. And she said, you know, you can just do improv if you want. And so she inspired me to do it, to kind of like dive into it. I had no idea what it was. And so when I was living in LA, I went to a couple shows at IO out there to see what this improv thing is. And then I just started falling in love with it. So I went from Houston to New York, back to Chicago, just like studying and performing and writing. So that's kind of how I fell into it. I always get jealous when people are like, oh, it was in my high school. And I'm like, dang, so lucky. I wish I would want to know where I would be right now if I started
Right.
high school. So cool.
Yeah, there's definitely, I wish I started younger like a lot of people do now. I feel like every generation kind of takes it younger and younger, but you feel like as an older generation, and I'm pretty older, it definitely started much later, much later. All right, so these are good. Does anybody else have one, or do you want to go to the next question?
I was just gonna add real quick, just because I did have improv in high school. We had like a well, we had like a weekly improv show called Wacky Wednesdays at Miami Springs Senior High, and it was just all like short form. But like when I went to college, I stopped doing acting improv because I was like, I need to get like a real degree. Like I can't pursue this. It wasn't until I moved back to Miami, and then while working a day job, like at night, I was like, oh, I used to go see Just the Funny in high school, so I'm gonna go check them out. And then heard that they had like, you know, classes or auditions or whatever. So it's like, there's a thing to like starting early, but it's like, yeah, you're never too late, or you could easily fall out of it. But it's, I don't know, I feel like you find it when you find it, and it's meant to be, so.
Yeah, I started super late. I actually had a friend invite me to her brother's show, like one of those, like, I graduated level, whatever, like at least twice. And my husband and I talked about it. We're like, oh, it's all the way downtown. That's too far away because we're in the suburbs, and, you know, we were just lazy. So we never went out to support her brother. And he's one of the directors and teachers over at Hideout Theater. And then another handful of years went by, and a friend of mine was graduating, and this is a friend I see like in my day-to-day life, and I was like, okay, I have to go support her. And after I saw her second show, and they had taken like 3 of my suggestions that day. I was like, this is such a fun way to like unleash my creativity that really I don't have another outlet for and haven't for decades, literally. So that's how I started. I got into Hideout Theater had already for a while before I arrived had diversity scholarship initiatives. And so I arrived kind of on the shoulders of others. A very supportive environment. There were a couple times during my classes, I remember, where they were kind of, you know, borderline kind of racist situations that came up, as happen sometimes in scenes. And both teachers, who were 2 different teachers, like they came in immediately and were like, let's discuss what just happened. And so it was just real, I'm really lucky that I got into such a supportive theater.
Cool. So, I mean, I think this is a good segue then into our next question, which is, you know, describe, if you can, what your experience as a Latinx improviser in your community is now. You know, talking about where you were before, each one of us is in a very different community. Each one of us, you know, has a different experience within that community because every community is different. So what does that look like?
Well, I started taking improv classes, I'd say in 2012 or 2013 in Chicago. And even that time, it was still all mostly predominantly white. And any classes that I took, you probably have 1, 2 Latinos top. And it felt like that for a long time until I would say about 2016. I'd say like 2015, 2016, like the last 5 years, I noticed there's more of a focus on being more inclusive, right? Just being fair, giving people stage time, just something that easy. But I noticed it more of an acceptance, I'd say in 2018, 2019. But I'd say in the past 8 years, I've seen it grow. But even just that long ago, though, it just really felt kind of limiting. And even when I went to my first few shows, I didn't even want to do it because when I saw it, I was like, oh, this is just, everybody looks the same. Everybody's in plaid and everyone's a guy and they're mostly from the suburbs. And that was just my exposure for 10 years going to improv shows until in my late 20s. I finally took a class and I was like, all right. And then until the last couple of years when, you know, especially some of the bigger cities like Chicago and New York and LA and Miami, always Miami, but they made it very important to give people some representation, seeing that in theaters and on stages. So, I mean, I personally feel like also I've seen a real turnaround. It's not enough, but I have seen some promise.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I guess to those who are coming from Chicago specifically, what made you stick with it? If you felt the same way that what Nicole experienced.
I definitely did. I moved to Chicago in 2016 and I did my whole training. And it wasn't until the last level of my training at IO that I had another Latino person in my class. And I remember, especially from coming from a community that was so like supportive of my identity and like, I didn't even have to think. I honestly never even thought about the fact that I was Latina, of that being like a super importance, because I was like, it was just me. And then realizing that me is so different from other people as soon as you step out of your community. And I cried many nights feeling completely out of place. Obviously, you know, being like, you know, I know that I'm talented. I know that I have a lot to give. I know that I have a lot of range and stuff like that, but just feeling inadequate because I felt like I just didn't belong. And not only that, not only because I looked different or sounded different or, you know, and, you know, all the other things like being a woman and being a plus size woman and, you know, being a queer woman and all this stuff, there just was no space there. And even when you asked for space, people they'd be like, yeah, sure, we'll give it to you, but they never really did. And so what I started to realize was that I was going to have to make space for myself. And as soon as I got done, you know, with the programs and I got a shot at being on stage, I was like, I'm going full out, full Cuban, full me. I joined teams that were all about Latino-ness. And I started producing and making shows because I was like, the only way that I'm going to get a spot here is if I really, really, just really stick out and I work hard and I make it happen for myself. But I can't even tell you how many nights, you know, months, weeks, just crying and just feeling like maybe I should just pack it up and go back home where it's easy, where I belong, where I don't stick out like a sore thumb, where people don't make, you know, where I have space to be.
Yeah.
And it was just the weirdest. And, you know, obviously I say that out of like huge privilege of being in a community. And I remind myself every day that like I didn't experience a lot of racism and a lot of stuff until I moved here. But it was wild. It could really change your perspective about a lot of things when you suddenly realize that there just was never a space made for you to be part of it.
Well, I think the cool thing is that you made that space for yourself. And I think that's one of the things that I learned. You know, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in, Marlene. I see you. But I just kind of want to piggyback off of what Steph was saying, is that, you know, I was coming from, you know, living in the Bronx in New York, and my family's Puerto Rican. And so I had all that, I had my family there. And then like doing improv out there, it was just, it had a nice, small, but a nice amount of, enough for me to feel okay. But when I came out here, I felt the same way, where it's like, what is this? What's happening? Why is it so, I feel so left alone. But one of the things, really great question you're asking, David, is why did I stay? And it's like, kind of like what Steph is saying, it's like, you know, I'm gonna use this corny, this quote, but it's like, be the change you want to see in the world. So it's just like, I'm like, you know what, forget it. I'm going to be that change. I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to go as far as I can. I've created programs. I've encouraged workshops and pushed for, I wish I could even do more, or could have done more before COVID. But yeah, it's just about, and the one thing I will say I thought was really, really cool is that when people, I mean, it is kind of intimidating when you see like all these white people and you're like, oh, they think this thing is funny. I don't think that's funny. I'm not interested in that, whatever. So you think you're out of place. But I will say there is a nice appreciation for when you bring what your background is. Like when Steph did her solo show, it was awesome. Like people loved it. And it's because they don't get to see that. So we're bringing what we have to the table and bringing something different and something fun. And so it's just a matter of like taking that step and, you know, and showing what you got. So, because people actually do appreciate it. They just, sometimes they fear what they don't know.
Marlene, why don't you go ahead and add to that?
Yeah, I wanted to add something because I definitely wanted to piggyback on what Steph said and what Jules just finished mentioning as well, which was for me when I joined improv, and that was, you know, back in 2008 or so, you know, it was, even then it was still very much male dominated, and I was only one of a few women. And I thought, oh gosh, do I even belong here? That inadequacy of the, do I belong in this? Is this my tribe? Is this my scene? I don't know yet. And because it was just something that hadn't evolved to that point yet. And I'm thankful that, you know, obviously with the years that we've had, you know, we have now, you know, more than 15 women, 20 women in our cast, you know, and that was really something that evolved over time. And something that, you know, going back to what you had just said, which was, you know, are we being represented? And for me, there was a moment of, okay, are we? Because here we are, even in Miami, that seems like it's such an open, a place that's so culturally, you know, open to Spanish speakers and Spanish cultures and Latino cultures. And I love that. And yet still, we hadn't had a Spanish show, and we hadn't had Spanish classes. And I remember, you know, saying, well, we need to do this. Let's do this. Let's launch this. And, you know, this may be a plane that may take off and land, you know, and only be in the air for 14 seconds, or it may stick around. And, you know, I'm glad to say that, you know, we've had, you know, our Que Pasa improv team, and, you know, we've had a consistent Spanish team to perform in Spanish and in English. for more than 3 years now. And obviously we're even offering Spanish classes, which is something that, you know, people were hungry for and people wanted, and we needed to satisfy that. So, you know, I think that we, you know, slowly we can, you know, stay on that path, because people do want that, even in other towns, you know, where even the culture isn't as prevalent, you know, Latino culture, but it's still something that we can work towards for sure.
Yeah. Now, Will, I have a question for you, because I was thinking, all right, Will, when you were introducing yourself, and you know, you've got this incredible career in improv. When you were first starting out, what was that like? Because we're talking different cities. We're also talking different time periods, multiple time periods, as you moved around. What was your beginning like?
So I got introduced to improv when I was a freshman in college in Boston, and that kind of I point that out. It's pretty important because I think it's a big part of my story, because I was trying to do theater. I didn't do a lot of theater in high school, and I just wanted to do it. I missed all the auditions. I didn't know what it meant to prepare a monologue. I didn't know any of that. But then there was this one audition sheet that was like, no experience necessary, no preparation necessary. I'm like, all right. I want to do that. And then that was for an improv show, an improv group at Boston College. And I got in, and I was the only Latino in the cast, right? And it was the first time that they brought in somebody into the cast with a diverse, but that wasn't white, basically. And I bring it up. It was important to me because once I started to do it, people then told me, and it's a shame that this is how I discovered it. People then told me that, like, or started to ask me, did you do improv in Chicago? Because that's where you grew up. And I'm like, wait, why? Why is that important? And I knew nothing. I grew up in Chicago until I was 18. I grew up on the South Side, had no idea that I was a few miles away from like the epicenter of all improv. I didn't know that, like, Second City, growing up on the South Side, there was nothing, for me, there was nothing north of the Sears Tower in Chicago. Like, I didn't know, that was like I had no idea what was up that way. But I bring that up because I look back at that time, I'm like, there was no real outreach going out into those neighborhoods. I grew up in a very Mexican neighborhood in Chicago. There was no outreach that way. And I always think back of, like, what if I was exposed to improv at an earlier age when I grew up in Chicago, how, what would have happened? How, where would my career have gone? But I'm actually thankful that I had to work to find it later, because now that's become a big part of how I ran Improv Boston, how I'm helping to run Improv Asylum now, and how I run Florida Studio Theater. Improv is like, we got to go find people. We got to bring it to them, right? And so here in Sarasota, it's a small city, right? We're 60,000 year-round, right, residents, 100,000 at peak. Right? It's a small town, but our cast, we have 3 Latinx players, including one formerly from Just the Funny. For a small cast, that's a nice size. But now I have to go to the Latin communities nearby, and we'll go there, and I'm like, you know what? Let's find a room. Let's find the back of a restaurant. Let's find a community center, and we're gonna do a show in there, because for me, it's because I wish somebody did that for me. Like, I wish somebody came to Pilsen or Little Village and did a show there, because that would have been very helpful for me. And I'm hoping that there's a Will Luera in one of these communities that'll be like, hey, this is a cool thing, I want to do this. So that's kind of bringing the last 2 questions into one answer for me.
No, that's fantastic. And I guess this is the perfect segue into, and we could probably base everything around this, which is, what are some of the biggest challenges that we as a Latinx community or Latinx improvisers in our communities, what are we facing? And again, this could probably take up 5-6 hours alone, but I'm sure plenty of people have plenty of things to say. So just start firing off, because there's a lot of challenges out there. We should definitely talk about them.
I don't mind just very quickly getting on this. I know for me, I go back to maybe 20 years ago when, and this isn't in any way to disparage the work that UCB has done, which has been significant and amazing. but I do remember when the idea of the first unusual thing, right, which you still hear a lot of teachers talk about. The way it affected me as a Latinx player back then is that I was the only non-white person in the cast, and so I was always the unusual thing. The thing that I brought to the table, which was a reflection of my life growing up, was always the unusual thing. And after a while, I'm like, all right, either I have to start playing like white people, or you guys have to just accept what I bring as normal. This is what I'm bringing is normal for me. So stop making me the unusual thing, right? So that it affected me early on, and I'm thankful. Kind of like what Steph was saying earlier, like. I'm thankful that I didn't retreat from it, and I kind of just leaned into it and was like, hey, this is who I am. And then as an artistic director, I was like welcoming everybody. I'm like, be who you are, and everybody else, especially like the 20 to 30-year-old straight white man, let's not treat that as weird. That is their normal, and let's honor that, right? And that went for everybody. That was beyond just Latinx. That was the entire community. Anyways, that's my answer.
No. Interesting. Fantastic. Great. What other challenges are you facing, in your community? And we've got Chicago, which is obviously huge and well, maybe not as huge as it used to be, but changing, let's just say. And then you've got Austin, which is its own fun little bubble. And then Eddie, you're out in industry land there. So you've got a whole different set of challenges and probably perspectives as well. And then we've got Miami, which is another very interesting, diverse bubble. So it's going to be a lot of different challenges here.
I think everybody's challenges obviously are going to be very different. One challenge I could probably name that for me becomes a little frustrating is and I'm a very patient person, but like where you feel like you constantly have to teach people, that's frustrating. And I mean, again, you look at me, I'm Black, right? I'm Black, but I'm also Puerto Rican, and it's really frustrating and insulting when people choose not to take the time to learn on their own, or like they feel like you should be teaching them, or there's something that happens on stage. And one thing I always hate is when I get that look from the other players, like, is that okay to say, or is that okay to do type thing. For me, that's frustrating because I'm just like, you should know, or you should try to know, or at least educate yourself the same way I've been forced to educate myself in everything white. It's been forced on me since I was a child, all of us, whether we know it or not. But that's something that's a big challenge.
Now, Jules, that's really interesting. And if I'm pressing too much, tell me. But can you give an example of that? Because I think for people watching this who may be sitting there right now saying, wow, I don't know if I've ever done that before. What does that look like? Could you give us a specific example, just because I think that would be helpful?
There's different examples in different variety of ways, but one thing that sticks out in my head, so dumb, but like, I'm from Houston, I'm from the South, and we have different phrases and things that we say regularly, and I kind of like in Will's case where I would say that on stage, like, for example, this is so dumb, but I remember one time saying that I put my foot into this food that I made, and everybody's like, where I'm from, that means, you really hooked up this food. You like really doctored it up and made it good. You really put your heart into this food. And it turned into that scene. And see, that's a different variety. That's like that's a phrase that we Southerners say, Black folks say all the time. But like, there'd be awkward moments where people, I don't know, or I've had people try to touch my hair, or like it makes the audience cringe, or I don't know. It's a variety of things. Like, it's just, or was that okay? You know, I said, or I remember even sitting in the audience one time and of an improv show of a team I wasn't even on, and they were talking about something. I forgot what it was, but it had to do with something rather racist, and I got all these looks for approval. Is it okay to laugh at this type of thing? Like, no, you need to decide. Do you think that's funny? Do you think that's smart? Like, I shouldn't have to like teach you how to do that. These are just kind of the small things that kind of go off the top of my head, but I can't think of anything right now that's like super, highlighted in my memory. Because honestly, stuff happens all the time. And, I literally do this. I'm like, I'm not going to give it energy. I just can't.
Right.
So, yeah.
I've personally had challenges with teaching as well. Although I'm always willing to give it my best to try to get on the same page with people. But kind of similar to what Julia was talking about doing my own research and stuff like that. Moving to this community, I had to learn a lot about, just American culture in general, where, maybe back home I could kind of, do my Don Francisco, do all of my stuff that people in the area know about. I had to look into like, what does Chicago find funny? Like Schaumburg is the Hialeah of Illinois, stuff like that. And I just found it, like there wasn't the same reciprocation with other cast members. And I had at one point had to be like, sorry, Chicago. I at one point had to be like, y'all need to learn about the shit that I have in my culture, because I can't just do shows about the things that are valid and, kind of like what Will was talking about, like that being that unusual thing, I'm like, this is normal for me. Like, this is what I grew up in. And like, I have to sit there and, read and look into shows and things that you guys are mentioning, especially in short form, for suburbia here, US suburbia. You have to know a lot of things that I wouldn't necessarily need to know unless I was performing short form. And I just found it so whack that they didn't know the things that you would need to pull a Latino audience or a Black audience or, whatever kind of audience. And, it's wild. I've had so many of those like educational conversations, and, I don't own a theater and I don't, teach where, but I'm over here like, you need to do this. And that is the most frustrating thing. And eventually, it gets to the higher ups and, it almost seems like it's their idea to do it. But that's the frustrating part. And I would say I quit a team, one of my Herald teams, because I was like, at the end of the day, no matter what character I'm playing, I'm still this woman on stage. I'm still this person. And I can't constantly exist in like a diner in Indiana, like, cause like, I'm just not always going to be in a diner in Indiana. And I'm just like, I can't do this white stuff anymore. Like, I love you guys. You have very good intentions. I know you're not racist, but if you can't expand your world out of this, then I don't want to play in it. And I'll just do my own thing, and it sucks because it's like so many people are talented and with good intentions, and there's just like all these roadblocks that people do not want to admit to, because then it would require work on their part. And so it's very interesting for sure.
I'd like to hit that challenge from the other side. And that is to say that I feel like there's a lot of restraining of ourselves that happens when you are the minority, which happens often in whether it's classes or shows or whatever. And I founded a group called ATX Stage Diversity, and I got really lucky in that a lot of people joined me. So now there's like a whole group of us that get together and plan events. And originally our plan was to have conversations, like we were just going to just talk about diversity kind of across the performance arts. in Austin. And what ended up happening is that it became a way for people to connect with each other. And, you know, even really to me, what seemed like very like minority groups within Austin, for example, like there was, in our first meeting, there was a man who was like, I am, you know, I'm a Filipino man, and like, I'd be looking for a theater, you know, some kind of theater performance that would fit me in it. And then somebody across the room was actually creating something like that. And there was just like a lot of emotion throughout the room. And it reminded me of when Escándalo first started, the improvised telenovela. And we all were having like a pre-cast party. And we're all Latino, so there were like 3 pre-cast, you know, pre-show parties and 3 after-show parties. So one of those where everyone was talking about how starting in childhood, they were restraining their culture, you know, and never really realizing until that moment how much they had been pushing down and not sharing. And again, like just a lot of tears, because you don't even realize how much you are changing yourself to fit in with what your white castmates will be comfortable with, what they think is funny. And you're only sharing maybe a tenth of, you know, the richness that you have in you. And that can be really sad.
Wow. Eddie, you've kind of like going along a different line, but similar to Will, in that you've been in different improv communities, starting off in Miami, going to Chicago, and now in LA. Now that you're in LA, what's that like? And what are some of those challenges?
I mean, yeah, in LA, like the improv community is definitely different than Chicago. I mean, and everyone's experience is different, but I really enjoyed my Chicago improv experience. And in LA, it's different in the sense that a lot of people are doing it like as a means to get to something else. Whereas in Chicago it was like purely, at least I felt like, was just exploring, and it was all about the art and like, you know, doing all these different shows. As far as like with Latinx, like there are the different theaters, you know, Will mentioned like UCB, I come from like Second City, IO. And a lot of those theaters can get like very cliquey, or like, you know, there's an improv community, but then each of them have their own communities. And I find that specifically like with the Latinx, at least out in LA, seems to be pretty good in that we all kind of know each other and will support one another. So even though like I brought Geraldo out from Chicago to LA, and we were doing like an hour variety show where we do improv in Spanish, but we highlight other acts. And we would invite people from other theaters to do our show, and we would go and like sit in on their shows or support. Because if you want to talk about community, then there needs to be that actual community, right? Like the sense of support. Right. And I felt like that was something that when I first got there, I was lacking. As far as like you mentioned the industry thing, like that's a whole nother beast in that. And I just wanted to quickly touch upon, like, I love what everyone's saying. And for me, there's like the delicate balance of like, just ultimately just being yourself, right? Bringing you to the table. But like, I love playing a Cuban character and I love bringing all my Spanish in. I also love not doing that at times, and just because I love a bunch of other things, right, that I think are funny, or other things, and not even comedy. I love like weird, dark sci-fi stuff, and I want to be able to explore all that. And when I first got to LA, I did a CBS diversity showcase, and you know, all these different diverse talent, and we're there for a reason, but for the wrong reasons, it seemed like I was in a scene that I thought was working fine, and they were like, you need to have an accent in this scene because otherwise people are going to be like, why is he diverse? Is he gay? And I was like, well, first of all, like, why would that be a bad thing if I was? And second, why can't, I thought this was all just to like, for us to spotlight this diverse talent, that we can be funny by not playing into stereotypes or flipping those stereotypes on their head. And that happens. Like I know, look, I'm white passing, you know, like I know I can go into an audition and people will be like, it's in Spanish, and I'll do it. And they'll be like, wait, are you sure you can speak Spanish? And I'll have to prove myself in the room over and over. But anyway, just long story short, just being like, for me, it's a balance. It's like, you know, I see myself 100%, and I'm proud to be a part of the Latinx community and the Latinx improv community. And at the same time, I want to be able to like, that doesn't mean I can't do this other stuff. and I can hang with you guys doing this non-Latino stuff. But if you need someone to pop in and do some Spanish or do those, like, I'm game for it. I think it's just each person individually to their own comfort level.
Yeah.
So,
Marlene.
yeah, I just want to add on to that because as a person who does not look Hispanic at all, and that in itself, I know, right, has been a challenge for me because it's like I always have to prove myself as well. It's like, no, wait a second, hold on, and I have to constantly prove myself that I am bicultural, that I relate to both cultures and the languages and the customs and everything else and the people, and so that's something that I always channel and I'm very proud of. And I know in some cultures, like what Laura was saying, is that it's suppressed. It's like, you don't want to, you don't want to, you don't want to make yourself known that that's something that you're doing. For me, one of the challenges that I constantly face is letting people know that this is something that is so important for us to reach out to. I mean, outreach is really important because, like what Will said, when I was growing up, if it hadn't been because somebody plucked me out of my neighborhood that I was growing up, that was not, was essentially a working class neighborhood, plucked me out and took me to the theater and said, look, this is what theater is. And it completely opened my eyes. And all of a sudden I was engaged and I committed myself to that. And so I think it's really important that for me, it's a constant battle to educate and to bring people into this world, whether it be, theater or the arts or whatever. And of course, then there comes the question of, is it supported? Because in a lot of times, when we were growing up, we would go to field trips out to go see shows or plays or, musicals or whatever. And it seems like that has definitely not been something that, that is as prevalent as it used to be. So I think it's also an arts educational issue as well.
Okay.
Real quick, because just hearing Eddie speak, I think at the end of the day, the biggest challenge is letting everyone know that Latino culture and American culture are like this, because my Latino culture is American culture. So, I think that depending on where you are, whatever, you have to lean into certain things, but it doesn't mean that that's all that you are. And I think at the end of the day, once we get through this phase of like it really integrating different cultures and that becoming the norm, then we can like mentally move out of like, I need to own this space. And it's just like, yeah, bro, I want to be Americana too. Like I am. I was born in the US. I'm American, but I'm also Latina and like, move over, bitch.
Okay. All right. We're close to showtime for the shows, but I wanted to wrap up by doing a quick lightning round around the room here. And I have one last question for you. I actually have like 5 other questions. We easily could go on another hour and a half to 2 hours with this. And why don't we make an agreement to hopefully do this again sooner rather than later if you're game for it. I would definitely love to continue this conversation because I think there's a lot more here. By the way, speaking of what everybody's just said, make sure you do your census before it's up, because if you don't, we don't get represented. And advertisers already know who to advertise to. Just look at who's getting into commercials. It's a whole bunch of Latinx. And they know the census before we've even taken it. So make sure that you fill it out. And that's to everybody here and also watching. Here we go around the room. There is a beginning Latinx improviser somewhere out there. In one sentence, what piece of advice do you give them? Nobody can repeat what has already been said. I'm going to start off with Nicole because I have not heard from her in a while. So Nicole, you get to go first.
I would say be true to yourself. Don't try to edit yourself when you're on stage or edit yourself around any communities you're with, or feel like you are trying to prove you're one thing over another, or trying to prove against any any thoughts that people have right when they see you right away. Be true to yourself. Be true to what you play on stage. Don't hold back. And I would say that because I feel like a lot of times, at least with my family, improvisers, they would feel like, will they make fun of me? Am I coming out too stereotypical? Is this, am I a phony? Am I a fraud? So stay out of your head, be true to yourself.
All right, thank you. Next up, we'll go over to Jules. Jules, what can you?
My biggest piece of advice is, well, I have two pieces, but I'll do quick. Pick your mentors wisely.
Yes.
Know who your mentors are and choose them because you are drawn to them, and there's something about their aura and their spirit and who they are that affects you in a positive way. And keep your eyes on your own paper. Everybody's path, everybody's journey is different. Just because somebody's on SNL doesn't mean that that's your path. You will be okay. You are going to succeed.
All right, thank you. Eddie, I'm going to jump back to you. One piece of advice you would tell a beginning Latinx improviser.
No pare, sigue, sigue. It's not easy, man, but keep going. Like, you know, we have to work twice, 3 times as hard, whatever, but it's in our blood, right? That's what we do. And like, there's going to be hard times. I'm wearing this Miami Heat hat. Dwayne Wade had that famous commercial, fall down 7 times, get up 8. That's what it's all about. Just keep going.
All right, brother. Thank you. Lauda, tell us what you got.
I would say that if you are looking around and you're like, I'm not sure where I can join, to start your own thing and to not be afraid of doing it really, really early. So I think there's a lot of imposter syndrome. I mean, especially as a person of color, but for anyone, any human, where you're like, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, blah, blah, blah. Just start your own thing, find your people. There's so many different personalities out there. You'll know who they are, and just start something.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Will, you can, one piece of advice.
You don't need to yes and everything. If somebody is trying to put you in a box and you're not comfortable in that box, like it's reinforcing negative stereotypes, it's all right to call a timeout on that, and you don't need to yes and that idea if somebody's trying to do something, again, put you in a negative box.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Marlene, one piece of advice you'd give to a beginning Latinx improviser.
You define your own success. And that would be it for me. It's, you know, this is your show, and you define that. So just don't let anybody else tell you whether you're right or you're wrong.
Awesome. Thank you. Steph, take us home.
I would say no matter what the little voices in your head say, you belong, and make sure to stand up there so other people can know that they can stand up there with you too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I want to thank all of you. This was absolutely fantastic. And just personally, it's been great to see everybody. But more importantly, this could easily go on another 2 to 3 hours. And I would be, I'd have a million questions for you and so eager to hear what you have to say. So let's please do this again. I want to give some shout outs here. Steph Perez, thank you so much. Will Luera, thank you. Jules, Julia Morales, and everything you're bringing to the table up in Chicago. Thank you. Laura Galan Wells, thank you so much, representing Austin. And clearly there's a bug that's making a cameo. And Eddie out in LA, the Heat will hopefully win one.
I sure hope so. We'll see. We'll see.
I'm just happy they made it this far. Right. Nicole, it's so great to see you again. Thank you for everything. I know that one little nugget at the end, what a great way to kick off the advice piece. And Marlene, partner in crime, thank you so much. We're going to move on to our shows now. So we're going to say goodbye to everybody. So if you could stop your video and mute, we're going to move into our show aspect. Thank you so much. That was our panel. How exciting was that?